Everyone, and welcome to the final international seminar in the International Center for Philosophy at Beijing Normal University at Zhuhai's seminar series for the academic year of 2023 to 2024. There will, of course, be seminars in the second half of the year at the beginning of the 2024 academic year, but I have the great pleasure to I'm not presenting today. To introduce to you today Chris Renali from the VU Amsterdam. I cannot ever get the pronunciation of the Universiteit properly, so VU will have to be VU
Sure.
Amsterdam. Chris is an assistant professor of philosophy at VU Amsterdam, and his research is primarily in epistemology. His recent work includes What's So Bad About Echo Chambers and Closed Mind Belief in Indoctrination. Chris is part of Rick Peel's Extreme Beliefs Group, as funded by the European Research Council, where the group in general, and I believe Chris in particular, is kind of researching weaponized doubt, meaning, and identity conferred beliefs, and how to reconcile deep commitments with serious challenges. Chris undertook his undergraduate and graduate degrees at the University of Edinburgh and the University of California, Berkeley. And today he's presenting to us the talk, Conspiracy Theories You Can't Reject, but Can Ignore. Chris, would you like to please take it away?
Yeah, thank you so much, Em. That was a really nice introduction. So I realized that the title of the talk is different from the one I sent around initially in May, I believe, and also the abstract, of course, is different too. But there's a pretty strong overlap. So the original thought was I was just going to focus on these folks that I call conspiracy worldviewers. Um, and just kind of look at the epistemology of that. Whereas now those folks are kind of integrated into this talk and just play a role in it rather than being the primary focus. Okay, so conspiracy theories you can't reject but can ignore. Effectively, that is the thesis of my talk, that there are certain conspiracy theories that it's just not rational or you're not justified in rejecting, but you ought to nevertheless ignore them. So I try to really drive a wedge between what you ought to reject and what you ought to ignore, and why these two phenomenons are different, and why this actually matters for our thinking about the sort of epistemic status of uh, our attitudes towards conspiracy theories. So it's going to take like 15 slides until I get to the plan. So just bear with me for a moment. I just want to introduce the basic problem, which will be a problem that is familiar to lots of people who have already done a lot of epistemology. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, so consider the following claims. Someone thinks or utters COVID-19 doesn't exist. The pandemic, as they put it, was created by the Illuminati to push vaccines in order to track and trace people. 5G electromagnetic waves are responsible for the symptoms that people were experiencing. Or the following: the King of England is a reptilian alien. The royal family is part of a bloodline of evil aliens that rule the world. So the way I interpret these kinds of claims is that they are part of a broader nexus of claims. So there's this historian, Michael Barkun, who gives this three-part tripartite kind of taxonomy of conspiracy theories. And in discussion with M, I've sort of persuaded that, yeah, this three-part distinction in conspiracy theories might not be the most fruitful way of carving theoretical reality at the joints, as it were. Um, for the purposes of the talk, I'm still going with the phrase super conspiracy theories, that these kinds of claims are a part of, are embedded within, or sort of flow from, but I'm not really wedded to the taxonomy exactly. What really matters for me are these two properties. The first property is one over many. That is, the conspiracy theory purports that all major social events are just part of one grand conspiracy, and the other conspiracy theories then that we see are kind of nested within it. So to give you an example, take a conspiracy theory like the one about there being a second shooter um, for JFK, or how the mafia was involved, or how the CIA was involved, or maybe even all three. And then take the Illuminati conspiracy theory, which says something like, look, you go back really far in the past, there's this evil, very powerful group that is kind of orchestrating all major social events sort of behind the scenes, and they're kind of pulling all the strings. Well, the idea is that these more like specific, more particular conspiracy theories, these more local conspiracy theories about things like JFK's assassination, or about, say, the moon landing, that it was like a hoax. The super conspiracy theories sort of embed those within them, and instead of explaining them in more local terms with respect to the CIA, or with respect to the mafia, they rather explain them going further back to a grander conspiracy, one involving the Illuminati. So that's this idea of just nesting, that other conspiracy theories end up being nested in one grand conspiracy theory. Um, and the second element is evidential preemption. This is not my phrase. As far as I know, it comes from Andre Begbie in a paper, I believe, of the same name. Um, but here I just want to apply the idea. So the idea of evidential preemption is something like, you have evidence which preempts you sort of from trusting a particular source. And in this case, the idea is that the conspiracy theories posit that the conspirators are super powerful. In fact, they're sort of epistemically super powerful. So much so that the usual sources of evidence we have to kind of form beliefs and doubts about ordinary social political claims, all of those routes to evidence become basically suspect, because they could be the products of the conspiracies themselves. This kind of systemic evidential preemption is not unique to super conspiracy theories, but you also see this in certain forms of religious fundamentalism. So, for example, there's some Christian fundamentalists who will say things like, well, look, there's actually no evidence that human beings evolved through a process of natural selection, because all of the fossils that the scientists sort of look at, those fossils were actually placed here by the devil deliberately to mislead the scientists, and thus all the other people that they communicate their views with. So that would also be a kind of systemic evidential preemption, where it posits a super powerful epistemic actor that can kind of corrupt the usual flow of evidence. So anyway, basic point is, the kinds of conspiracy theories I'm interested in are the ones that nest others within them and have the systemic evidential preemption as part of the sort of features of the conspirators. And yeah, here is that tripartite distinction. So again, the way Barkun is thinking about it is like, well, there's actually three kinds. There's these more local event conspiracy theories that it would be something like, the mafia is actually responsible for JFK's assassination. There's the more systemic conspiracy theories. And this could be something like Alex Jones used to talk about the New World Order. And the New World Order is basically like certain families, political elites, powerful business tycoons, certain CEOs of certain corporations, and that they form this kind of New World Order, kind of like a secret government, as it were, that is really behind a lot of social political changes around the world. Um, but they need not be sort of like super powerful to the same degree that the conspirators are in super conspiracy theories, because in super conspiracy theories, the conspirators almost have they almost have like supernatural like powers. So, they could be like interdimensional beings that are just beyond our, and whose like powers are just beyond our experience thus far, or they could be some kind of like demonic force or angelic force. But anyway, they have a more of like a supernatural flavor to them, or something that stands in for a supernatural entity within a naturalistic worldview, like a super powerful alien or a super powerful interdimensional being or something like this. And I guess the token example of the person who at least propounds this kind of conspiracy theory would be David Icke with the reptilian kind of like bloodline conspiracy theory. So again, I'm not really wedded to this distinction, but I do think it helps to give you like an initial lens by which to make sense of like how you might start to carve up different kinds of conspiracy theories. And so I think the kind of conspiracy theory I'm interested in is something like a super conspiracy theory, but it also might be systemic. It really just depends upon how how powerful the or I guess rather like how epistemically powerful the relevant conspirators are, if they really can undertake this kind of like systematic corruption of evidence. Okay, I can skip this. A few caveats. Evidential preemption comes in degrees, so it's not as though with these kind of more event or local conspiracy theories, there's no evidential preemption. There can be, but the kind of evidential preemption there need not be so epistemically problematic. So there might be some targeted actions to displace evidence and mislead serious investigation. So, for example, suppose for a moment that the theory that the CIA is responsible for JFK's assassination, it would make sense, for them to uh, put in place evidence which points away from the CIA's responsibility in it being Oswald, right? So kind of doing things to make Oswald look guilty. So that would be a kind of evidential preemption, but it's not sort of enough to where it sort of fundamentally prevents investigators from sort of like figuring out the truth. So if the truth were that the CIA did it, they're just not powerful enough to kind of ensure that all of our usual routes to obtaining and evaluating evidence is so corrupted that we can't trust it. Um, so that's a kind of really limited sort of evidential preemption that I'm not thinking about here. The kind I am thinking about is the second kind on this slide here. So for these sorts of super or super-ish conspiracy theories, there's really just no limit save for logical limitations to the actions the conspirators can take to displace evidence and mislead serious investigation. So again, like let's go back to the fundamentalism example. Um, you know, the devil is alleged to have the sort of power where he can just plant all the fossils on the planet with such that they suggest that if you carbon date it and everything, it'll say that people are like certain kinds of organisms are millions of years, millions and millions of years old. But the whole point is that this is fundamentally misleading on the assumption that the devil placed it there for us, for the purposes of us forming such a belief. So that would be the kind of example I have in mind. Likewise, the reptilian aliens, well, they they're so infiltrated into the usual sources of evidence, say for the American or European, where they have people infiltrating the New York Times or the Guardian or the BBC, MSNBC, Fox News, et cetera, so that you can't really rely on these kinds of sources to form beliefs and doubts about what's true or false with respect to major social events. Okay, so there's an epistemic asymmetry here. The kind of limited preemption that you see with the more local event conspiracy theories still allows investigators, serious inquirers into the claims to get justification to believe and come to know that the local conspiracy theories are happening or not happening or probably not happening. Um, yeah, so that is still a possibility. Whereas with this more pervasive evidential preemption, it's hard for me to see how you could, even in principle, get justification to believe and come to know that the super conspiracy theories don't obtain. Because if X hypothesize they're so powerful that they can corrupt all of our usual routes to evidence, then any piece of evidence I might get from uh, I don't know, someone in the government, their testimony, a committee's report, the analysis of engineers, anything like that, could itself be the product of the conspirators um, doing their work. So, um, if that's the case, then it seems as though I can't really rely on it, at least not without some kind of circularity going on. Um, What's also an interesting feature of these more super or super-esque conspiracy theories, I think, is that our clarity heuristics are bound to be, or they can be manipulated. So I take this concept from C. Tai Nguyen, who was sort of applying this concept in the case of thinking about like echo chambers, but also thinking about the way that sort of like formal systems of measurement can kind of really mislead, can really kind of seduce us. Um, and so he says when we experience the feeling of understanding or sense of clarity, that's a signal for us to close inquiry. So as soon as you get exposed to a certain way of thinking that gives you this feeling, a sense of clarity, it's like, aha, oh, now this really kind of makes sense of the whole. That's a signal for us to really stop the serious investigation into the relevant theory. It signals for us to just, yeah, you can just stop here. It's good enough. So when you get this sense of clarity, that's a signal to close inquiry. And the main idea is that this sense of clarity is really a kind of feeling. And the problem is that you can have the feeling without the genuine article. So you might have the feeling of understanding, the feeling of clarity, but it might be a mere feeling of understanding. You don't actually have a genuine understanding of what's going on yet. And my suspicion is that super-esque conspiracy theories, they are kind of ripe to give us the feeling of understanding the social world, and that's part of the attraction for many people with these theories. They give you they promise this feeling of understanding, and once you start using it to make sense of geopolitics, national politics, and so on, you get this feeling of understanding, like what's going on beyond what you can just glean from uh, what you read in the newspapers or what you watch on TV or magazines and so on. Okay, question. So you might be thinking, all right, so what? Even if we can't really get justification to reject these super conspiracy theories because of their systemic evidential preemptive powers, what's the big deal for us as like deniers? Right? What's the problem? The answer is that, well, there's a general principle or norm of justified belief, which says that if you're justified in believing one thing, P, and you know that P implies Q, then you are thereby justified in believing Q as well. Um, so this principle is plausible because it sort of explains how like deductive reasoning can give you justification. So if you believe, I don't know, you believe P, and you believe if P then Q, it seems like if you're justified in believing that stuff, you make a competent deduction, you can get justification to believe Q as well. And just also reflection on like really ordinary cases. So um, if you're justified in believing that you're in Beijing right now, and you know that if you're in Beijing, you're not in New York right now, then it seems like you're also thereby justified in believing you're not in New York right now. So this kind of closure principle sort of explains these two things. And epistemologists usually just say, yeah, this principle is so plausible that the rejection of this principle would just be highly revisionary, seriously unintuitive, definitely not a thing you want to do unless it's your last ditch effort to save an otherwise compelling view. Okay, so here's how then it works. Just take an ordinary kind of like social belief or presupposition that many people say have, like certainly many people in the United States have, which is Joe Biden's last election win was Democratic. Of course, there are in raw numbers quite a few people who don't believe that. But by and large, most people believe it, and most people, even if they don't explicitly believe this in, say, Europe, if you were to ask them, they would say, like, well, yeah, of course, like the election was Democratic rather than something else. Okay, now take the claim that the 9/11 Commission's report on the September 11th attacks were by and large correct, or the political decision makings of the EU Parliament is by and large the product of serious political discussion and deliberative procedures. These are all things a lot of people would just believe and think were justified in believing. The problem is that then from the closure principle, since these things seem to be incompatible with the relevant super-ish conspiracy theory like the reptilian one, then it seems like since we don't have justification to deny that theory, working backwards, then we also don't have justification to believe any of these, kind of run-of-the-mill, relatively uncontroversial claims. And that seems like a bad thing. Um, Okay. So one might say, okay, but maybe that doesn't matter since most people aren't really exposed to these sorts of super-esque conspiracy theories like the reptilian one. So it doesn't really pose a problem for them. It only really poses a problem, if at all, for the people who are exposed to those kinds of conspiracy theories and start to see that tension. Um, for me, I think yeah, that itself is true. But the problem is that people can easily be exposed to the super conspiracy theory because, as a matter of fact, um, mainstream media and especially social media, and certainly certain kinds of alternative media, do expose people to these kinds of conspiracy theories, even if it's in a kind of like negative light. So people still get access or can easily get access to it. And as I was alluding to earlier, over already back in 2012, public policy poll showed that over 12 million US Americans at least report believing that the reptilian aliens run the United States. And while the percentage is not very big, just in terms of raw numbers, that's quite significant. And about 88 million believe in the New World Order. So there, you're not maybe going to get the same uh, degree of evidential preemption because the New World Order is not, those conspirators are not as powerful as the reptilians are supposed to be. But they're still quite powerful. They can still corrupt certain usual sources to evidence like newspapers, magazines, television, etc. And 41, and here's a more general kind of like conspiratorial, like kind of, I don't know, mindset here. But 41% of US American adults believe that regardless of who is officially in charge of the government and other organizations, there is a single group of people who secretly control events and rule the world together. So that's kind of like a skeletal conspiracy theory, right? Like which particular groups or particular actors fulfill that role is kind of like up for grabs. But there's, you know, at least 41% are kind of like attracted to some uh, kind of like, I guess, uh, just skeleton of a conspiracy theory of this sort. um, Another issue with exposure is that there's strategic mainstreaming. So although being on social media, being on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all that stuff, Twitter, although it might not actually like change people's views about what's true or false so easily, It's still the case that people get a lot of exposure to conspiratorial ways of thinking or ways of representing the world. And this can help kind of mainstream those theories so that even if the people's beliefs in them don't change at all, so if you're a so if the deniers, like, they don't change, and the believers, they don't change, but it still helps to mainstream them to give people the sense that, oh, like, these are more serious considerations than I would have thought of than before. There's algorithmic amplification, so it's kind of well documented, although it's apparently has been changing, that, you know, the sort of like YouTube algorithm, it tends to lead one from more like innocuous social content to, quote, more extreme content, and sometimes this leads to exposure to these more super conspiracy theories. And also, these sorts of conspiracy theories just have entertainment value. So it's sort of fun. They're really sensationalist. They're really thought provoking. They have a lot of like entertainment potential, and so that helps with their click and shareability. So anyway, main point is that even if a lot of people aren't in fact exposed to them, it's pretty easy to become exposed to them. Okay, so here's the puzzle I'm interested in then. We're not justified, it seems to me, in rejecting super conspiracy theories. We don't really have the evidence we would hope for. Um, but we are justified in believing routine social political beliefs, like that Joe Biden democratically won the most recent US presidential election. Um, but if we're not justified in rejecting super conspiracy theories, then we're also not justified in believing these more routine social political beliefs. So there's like just a tension here, right? I mean, it looks like each of the three are individually plausible, but jointly inconsistent. And as I said at the very beginning of the talk, if you've done epistemology before, you'll already see, oh, I've already seen this puzzle before. Isn't it just the puzzle or the paradox of radical skepticism? And the answer is yes. So what I think is sort of interesting about these super conspiracy theories is that they sort of mimic radical skeptical hypotheses. And because of that, they pose, if not the same, a very similar problem with respect to belief in the sort of social political domain. So I said it would take like 15 slides to get to the plan. Here's the plan. I'm going to argue against denying the first premise. So I think some people will say, well, look, surely we are justified in disbelieving these super-ish conspiracy theories. And I want to say, that's not so clear. And also the arguments for why that would be kind of face a slippery slope problem. And then in the second part, I want to distinguish between three kinds of super conspiracy theorists. So I don't think everyone who kind of uses or traffics in or even accepts a super conspiracy theory like the reptilian one um, is the same kind of person. It's not a monolith here. So I distinguish between bona fide theorists. So these are like people who think of them as actual they treat it as just like an alternative explanation of what social reality is like. Then there's this other group, they're more like doubt mongering entrepreneurs, so they kind of just use these conspiracy theories for pragmatic or prudential ends. They need not believe them at all. They need not even accept them. They're just kind of using the theories as part of a practical goal that they have. And finally, there's this third group, which I think is most interesting, which I call the world viewers. And these are folks for where the relevant super conspiratorial claims are just fixed points for them, part of their worldview that they use to kind of like navigate the social world around them. It's what they use to sort of gauge the strength of various social political arguments and so on and so forth. So it's really having um, a acting as like their epistemological compass. Um, and because of that, it doesn't really enter into um, their kind of like serious inquiry about, is this true or not, or is this justified or not? It just doesn't really have that status for them. It's a fixed point. Okay. And then later, I want to argue that the best way of responding, at least from an epistemological point of view, not necessarily sociological but or political, but from an epistemological point of view, is to say that what's what's going on with these super conspiracy theories, even though we're not justified in rejecting them, they're just like not relevant alternatives to what we believe. They are indeed alternatives, but they're just not part of the set of relevant ones. And for that reason, we are justified in ignoring them, even if we're not justified in rejecting them. Final disclaimer, I'm not arguing that super conspiracy theories or the particular kind that I'm interested in, like the reptilian kind, you know, or the Illuminati sort, they're not necessarily paradigmatic of conspiracy theories. So they're actually quite special. And I'm also not arguing that conspiracy theory beliefs tend to be irrational or rational. I think it's just a case by case matter. So I even think that there can be people who are rational in believing uh, the relevant sorts of super conspiracy theories. And there can, but whether there are people for which it's rational to deny, I'm actually more suspicious of that, and that's what partly generates this puzzle. Um, yeah. Okay. Okay. So should we reject one, or that we're not justified in disbelieving super conspiracy theories? I think our knee-jerk reaction is that these are just so incredible that how could it be the case that we lack justification to deny them? That just seems incredible, right? Surely we must have sufficient evidence to reject them. Um, and this suggests that the justification we might have for disbelieving them is just sort of like easy. Um, like maybe that we can just subject them to kind of like an easy refutation. Um, So some people in the literature sort of suggest something like this. So I should say that um, they officially don't believe that, um, but they do say something in their paper which I think is interesting just to analyze, because although M themselves does not um, ultimately go along with this kind of reasoning that we'll see here in this paragraph, it is suggestive for me of how other people, um, why they might think we don't have, why we can kind of easily reject these sort of super conspiracy theories that posit the powerful interdimensional alien lizards. So here just want to focus on the following parts of the quote. So M says, conspiracy theories which posit the existence of interdimensional lizard people or a world which is simply a flat disk floating in space are the kind of thing most people not only think are in no way plausible, but they are so implausible that they are fantastical. By and large, most people do not think interdimensional lizards exist, and that the curvature and thus roundness of the Earth is easily verified by seeing the horizon, and so on and so forth. As such, if a theory goes well beyond the available evidence, then it's fantastical, and so we can treat it with suspicion. Reika and Basham, so they say the following: some conspiracy theories make claims so fantastical, like the reptilian one, that they go beyond what most people can accept as true. For example, the claim that interdimensional lizard people secretly rule the planet is an extraordinary one, and therefore requires extraordinary evidence. So I'm not attributing these claims as it were like views of these authors, but rather just as suggestions that might capture how a kind of like natural way of thinking about the epistemology of these conspiracy theories. And the way I see it, there's like two different sorts of arguments we can glean from these quotations, drawing on two principles. The first is this: if most people believe that P is implausible, then it's rational to believe that P is probably false. The second one is that if P is easily verified and a rival theory T is inconsistent with P, then we're rational to believe that T is probably false. So I think this kind of easy verification is somewhat present in Dentist passage here, and also to some extent the social epistemic conservative one, where like if most people think it's like so implausible, then like surely that's some reason to think that it's the relevant view is probably false. Riken and Basham maybe have a different principle that I don't have here, but something like if, yeah, I guess we could put it like this: if a theory posits, if its commitments are so, or if they're really extraordinary, then we need sort of like the same degree of extraordinary evidence in order to believe it. So the only issue I have here, at least with that first principle, this one, the social epistemic conservatism, is that the link between belief and probability is sort of obscure. So, I mean, what is the link between higher order facts like most people think that P is implausible and the first order epistemic facts like P is unlikely to be true? There's really no objective epistemic relationship there. I think that to the extent that we find such a principle plausible is because we have to relativize it to belief systems. So if maybe within, if you have certain like religious commitments as a fixed point, then maybe it'll seem plausible to you, the fact that there's so many other religious people, that sort of counts in favor of, I don't know, God, God's existing, or Jesus being the Son of God, or something like that. But if you don't have such commitments as fixed points, then you just won't see the fact that a lot of people believe that P as doing anything to speak in favor of whether P is true or not. Of course, it might, maybe the reasons why they believe P will do that, but just the fact that they do believe it alone won't do any tell you anything about P's likely truth or falsehood. This information, because you can always appeal to the usual informational routes to your ordinary social beliefs in an attempt to refute the relevant conspiracy theories about them. So so I guess my problem with it is that it's kind of like easily abused and exploitable, and it's hard to demarcate the kind of good cases of it from the bad cases of it without begging questions against other people. So consider the following. Maybe I'll reason as follows. The official account of 9/11 is correct. If the official account of 9/11 is correct, then the inside job, which says it was a controlled demolition, then that theory is incorrect. Therefore, the inside job theory is incorrect. Yeah, that would be like a way of following the kind of like easy verification principle, because I just say, well, look, I mean, surely we all know that the official account of 9/11 is correct, and that's inconsistent with the controlled demolition inside job theory. So we can just kind of deduce from that the controlled demolition theory is incorrect. So in this way, you can kind of like easily prove that the target conspiracy theory here, the inside job theory, is incorrect. And you can sort of generalize, I guess, from this case and say, well, look, it's always open to us to reason as follows. We're justified in believing some ordinary social political claim. And if we're justified in believing such a claim, then to the extent that there is some conspiracy theory which is inconsistent with it, then we're thereby justified in denying it. Thus, we're justified in denying the relevant conspiracy theory claim. It doesn't have to be a super conspiracy theory. It can really just be any one of them, any conspiracy theory. And that for me is the slippery slope problem. So if you think that this kind of reasoning is sort of permissible in the case of the more fantastical super conspiracy theories out there, why wouldn't it be permissible in the case of the more like local event conspiracy theories, where the person just appeals to stuff like, well, the 9/11 Commission report says this, and all of that is inconsistent with the controlled demolition theory. So, modus ponens, the controlled demolition theory is incorrect. So I think the risk here, the slippery slope, is that we risk slipping into generalism about belief in conspiracy theories. We can kind of just easily um, show in each case that the conspiracy theories are incorrect. They would kind of like permit that, and it would be hard to say why um, it if you don't like generalism, it'd be hard to say like why it doesn't work for these more local event conspiracy theories, but it does work in the case of the super or super-ish conspiracy theories like the reptilian one. So that's a slippery slope I see. So okay. Maybe another reason we should reject one, coming back to the extraordinary evidence idea. So again, super conspiracy theories, they do make extraordinary claims like that there's interdimensional lizards who are super powerful. And if such a theory makes extraordinary, here's a principle. If a theory makes extraordinary claims like that, then the evidence sufficient for confidence or believing it must be fittingly extraordinary. So the evidence one would need to believe rationally a super conspiracy theory must be fittingly extraordinary, but there is no fittingly extraordinary evidence for any super conspiracy theory. So, and if there is no such fittingly extraordinary evidence for it, then it's not rational to believe it. So it's generally then not rational to believe super conspiracy theories. This would be a kind of generalist argument restricted to these kinds of conspiracy theories, the super conspiracy theories. But I also think it doesn't work because here claims like extraordinary, terms like extraordinary, weird, and fantastical are really just rhetorical devices. At best, what they're really just doing is registering the fact that this particular group of people or some overlapping groups, of course, find the claims to be implausible. That is, like, these theories just have like ontological commitments that are not our commitments. We think that those commitments are implausible, or even more vanilla, they're just not. Those commitments are just not in the set of our commitments. So Gentith is also making a real similar point to me here. So they say that, what counts as fantastical is often context dependent. So here, like, I think of that as like, well, for, me and the people that I hang out with, yeah, we would consider, the ontology of the the reptilian conspiracy theory, we would consider that really fantastical. But if you're uh coming from a different group, maybe if you're already part of a group that, believes in supernatural beings anyway, then it won't seem as fantastical to you. So yeah, I agree with this context dependence idea. The other thing to say here is that it's not so clear that we should count um, the kind of it's not so clear that we should even count like commitments to like interdimensional reptilian beings that are super powerful as being like theoretical posits or ex or part of an explanation of what the world is like should it's not so clear we should treat them as like theoretical devices, because for some people it seems as though they have more of this like fixed point hinge like status where it really just informs like who they are, um how they kind of interpret the how they sort of interpret the world around them. It's not just like a theoretical posit that they think, has more going for it than the status quo theories do, or even like more ordinary beliefs do. They're So to treat it kind of like even as these things as conspiracy theories might not even be the right thing. And the extraordinary evidence argument just presupposes that we should that's what they are, that the super conspiracist claims are theoretical claims that make theoretical posits, but that's actually not so obvious. Okay, so the final part on that first premise. okay, maybe it is plausible that if a theory makes that, supposing it's a theory, if it makes extraordinary claims, then the evidence for believing it would need to be fittingly extraordinary. But what would be fittingly extraordinary evidence? Like what does that even actually mean? Okay, so consider something like um, a universal perceptually observable defect in the matrix that the reptilian overlords keep us in. So maybe if each one of us started having like this blip in like our vision somewhere that says that's like sort of suggestive of being in some kind of like mass simulated confinement or something, then that would be some evidence to think we are in such a scenario. Or if enough people witness and kind of corroborate from different parts of the world via like mainstream sources that, oh yeah, like here's the reptilian aliens, like we have like some footage of it and different, news outlets are covering it, just kind of like in the movies. Um, Okay, that would be like the fittingly extraordinary evidence. But what's interesting about all of this is that it's kind of this sort of evidence kind of aligns with status quo expectations. So it sort of already aligns with like a different kind of worldview, where the worldview is that like, well, look, if certain things are going to be true, these are like what we can expect from it, right? We can expect these things to happen. But if you're already more on board or a part of these kind of more super conspiratorial worldviews, these might not be the expectations you have at all, right? This might not think You might not think that these are the sort of things that um would count against the kind of um the main elements of your worldview. It might just strike you, it might just feel question begging for a person like that, because the expectation that there should be that kind of evidence, the kind I just mentioned, reflects our own ontological commitments and presuppositions about what the world is or would be like. So yeah, so I want to say it's unlikely that we're justified in rejecting super conspiracy theories like the reptilian or Illuminati one, at least when it's embellished in a certain way. To summarize, the usual informational context that we have for our usual pathways to belief, they just get systemically called into question. To the extent that we can use them, it looks sort of circular and question begging. So for that reason, we should be suspicious that we are justified in denying these sorts of conspiracy theories. Okay, now part two. So I've hoped to, make plausible that we're not justified in disbelieving these kinds of super conspiracy theories. So then that leaves the rest. I want to say something now about how the super conspiracy theorists, they're not a monolith. So at least one group doesn't even really seem to be believing them, or it's not necessary that they do. It's more like they just use them strategically to kind of facilitate doubt. So we know this from people who have done this before with of course, like smoking, for example, and also climate science. And part of the problem here is that it creates confusion, it unsettles people, it make confusion in the sense that like people aren't sure like what's like supported by the evidence or not. um and the people who doubt monger, who kind of like create this sort of like confusion, I try to spell them out formally as follows. Someone doubt mongers for a claim P if and only if S presents alternative possibilities of error. H for the immediate epistemic aim of instigating doubt about P in the service of some non-epistemic aim, like a financial end or preventing legislation or promoting a political ideology and so on. So, I mean, here would be an example of that in the conspiracy case. So in the United States, you have like a lot of Republicans who um, who peddle it's called the great replacement theory, and according to that theory, um like liberal and left-wing politicians and certain business owners, certain educators, university professors and so forth, they're kind of coordinating kind of like mass immigration into the country, where the idea is that the people that immigrate to the country will have kind of like be indoctrinated with like or left wing or at least non-conservative views, and that this will end up, kind of replacing the like true Americans, and thus like destabilize the United States and the conservatives' conception of like what America is and so on. Um, so they peddle this conspiracy theory in order to facilitate doubt about like the actual intentions and interests of people in, say, like the Democratic Party. And they're doing it, to kind of to promote their political ideology and also just to secure their own political agenda, making sure people, keep voting for the right wing. Um, and yeah, we see this with other sorts of conspiracy theories. So Alex Jones on Sandy Hook, famously the Las Vegas and Orlando shootings, who, would appeal to the New World Order. And okay, so why do that? Well, I mean, one explanation of it is maybe he doesn't actually believe any of this stuff, but it has entertainment value. It brings people to his shop where they can then buy his merchandise, gives him views, it sustains his financial welfare. David Icke on the pandemic and 5G, appealing to the reptilian conspiracy theory. Well, what does that do? Well, it secures a following. It does, sustain revenue for him, all these different like book tours and lectures and stuff like that. So you can kind of make sense of what some of these folks are doing, without saying that they actually believe the conspiracy theory, so that they're not like conspiracy theorists in the sense of they have a theory about what the world is like that they believe that rivals more, status quo orthodox views. Rather, they're just kind of using them for prudential benefits. Um, and yeah, some of these folks have like also a diverse following, so it's not just that there's like just some be like Alex Jones doesn't just appeal to like far right militia groups or anti-government people, but also people who kind of interested in alternative medicine and natural foods and supplements. So because he's also part of this, movement that criticizes mainstream medicine and nutritional science. So people will get exposure to his broader conspiratorial doubt mongering just through those routes as well. So what's so threatening about the doubt mongers? Well, basically for me, they're kind of like vehicles for these super conspiracy theories qua skeptical hypotheses, right? So they don't even need to believe them. They just need to like reveal them, expose people to them. And then it seems as though if what I argued is correct, since we don't have sufficient evidence to justifiably deny them, that's what poses this rational challenge on our ordinary social beliefs. um yeah, okay, there is a bit of a reply here. Maybe I don't know, should I skip this or not? So uh
So
yeah,
you
okay, so maybe,
are running close
sorry,
to time. So yeah, maybe you might want to skip this bit.
yeah, I might skip this. Okay, well there is one thing I did want to say here, just to talk about how there's not a clear-cut distinction between like having an epistemic aim where you treat a claim as like as part of a theory, or you don't, or you're not doing that. There is also quasi-epistemic aims, so um, they might not be put forward as rival theories in a rational contest to figure out which theory is the correct one. But their aims are not principally practical either, so they're not put forward to like promote an ideology, solicit followers, or secure like financial benefits. But as I was alluding to earlier, they can function like again as like the the commitments in the center of your web of belief acting as a fixed point. And so they're not part of like what you evaluate as, that's not part of like what you scrutinize. You rather You rather just take that as as like a basic commitment about what the world is like, and you sort of judge what the world is like against it. So it doesn't act, it's not, as it were, it's not in the space of reasons for you. And for that very reason, because it's not even in the space of reasons for you, it's not itself based on evidence or something reason generated. And you find this view articulated in Wittgenstein's Uncertainty. So here's what he says. He said, like, it may be, for example, that all inquiry on our part is set so as to exempt certain propositions from doubt. They lie apart from the route traveled by inquiry. Um, Everything that I've seen or heard gives me the conviction that no person has ever been far from the earth. Nothing in my picture of the world speaks in favor of the opposite. But I didn't get my picture of the world by satisfying myself of its correctness, nor do I have it because I'm satisfied of its correctness. No, it is the inherited background against which I distinguish true from false. So those kinds of things are called like hinge propositions. And my thought is that, well, for some people, these super conspiratorial claims, they have this like hinge or framework status. Um, and so they're not theoretical, kind of epistemological, evidential claims, but they're also not like the complete opposite either, where they're just put forward, inauthentically for practical purposes. They have some quasi-epistemic status. Um, Here would be an example of how that works. The religious conservative might say, here's like the policy. They say gay marriage is wrong, it should be illegal, and they base that on the following claim: the Bible says that it's wrong, which in turn trades for them on the following hinge or fixed point that one should trust the Bible. And I think that there might be conspiracy hinges out there that form the fixed point for certain people, that they're the center of their web of belief. So something like, there is a nefarious group that orchestrates nearly all world events. So here's how then their, what their reasoning looks like. COVID-19 is a pandemic. 5G activates a poison in the vaccine. They believe that on the basis of David Icke, who's done a lot of research at odds with the mainstream, says as much. And so what makes the transition from the conspiracy, what makes the transition from having this like kind of like testimonial evidence to the conspiracy belief, what kind of like rationalizes it? Well, what rationalizes it is the hinge commitment, right? That you already presuppose, it's already your fixed point, that the official agencies in positions of power and newspapers and TVs, all that stuff, that they're untrustworthy. And so this can get expressed in different ways. So it might be you have this generic conspiracy hinge or fixed point, and how that manifests might just depend upon the different subculture. So in one subculture, it might manifest as don't trust the government. In another subculture, it might manifest as don't trust the health authorities. And all of these then help to kind of legitimize or enable more local conspiratorial beliefs, like COVID-19, the pandemic is actually a plandemic. And that's the one that stands at odds with the more local official status quo belief that, it's like a public health crisis, an ongoing pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can also do the same thing for people who are not at all having conspiracy worldviews. So they might have a status quo hinge, something like, there's a group of people who are, that have our best interests at heart. They're really trustworthy, they're capable, they're good intentioned, and that can manifest in different communities as trust the government, trust health authorities, and so on, generating the local official belief, which stands at odds with the local conspiracy belief. Okay, so what's interesting about this for my purposes is that if conspiracy hinges and the more anti-conspiratorial status quo hinges, they would be beyond being justified or unjustified, as Wittgenstein put it. So it would be the case that we're not justified in disbelieving them, as I argued before, but it would also be true that we're not justified in believing them either, because again, they're just the fixed points. They're not like believables, right? They're rather like presuppositions of our worldviews. So on the quasi-epistemic view of these super conspiracy theories, the super conspiracy theories and their rival status quo hinges are not in the space of epistemic reasons. They are for their adherents not rationally valuable. Okay, so the person who that kind of person is what I call a conspiratorial worldviewer. And of course, there's also going to be the anti-conspiratorial worldviewer too that kind of complements them. So I think then we have the conspiracy entrepreneur, the worldviewer, and finally the bona fide theorist who really is treating these things like theories. Okay, now this is my last part. If I can just have like 3 minutes, then we're good. So here's like what I want to say, how we can like preserve our rationality. Consider the fact that skeptics employ the following principle. To know that something is so, we need to be able to rule out all the alternatives incompatible with its being so. So famously, J.L. Austin talked about this and said, like, well, look, if you're, in around Peterborough you're out in the middle of a field and you see a bird that looks like a goldfinch, you're justified in believing it's a goldfinch to the extent that you can rule out certain alternatives, like to the extent that you can rule out that it's like not a duck, or to the extent that you can rule out that it's not like a hawfinch. Maybe those kinds of finches also frequent the area. But he said, look, it would be irrelevant if someone said, well, look, I mean, couldn't it be like a stuffed goldfinch? Or like maybe it's like a hologram of a goldfinch. Like, how do you know that it's not one of those things? That's incompatible with what you claim. And Austin said, like, well, yeah, but it is incompatible with what I claim, but it's not it is an alternative, but it's not a relevant alternative. It's not among the things you need to be able to rule out to justifiably believe what you claim to believe. And so that's the idea I'm going to work with. And the way I flesh it out in the social context is through normative expectations. So we can expect others to know certain things that we need not know because of their professional, civic, or personal role with others. And sometimes we can have illegitimate expectations of others as well. So we might expect people to know things that they are that it's not legitimate for us to expect them to know. So, for example, if I go to my GP, I can reasonably expect her to like know how to like treat the flu, or know how to treat pneumonia, or know how to treat certain like bacterial infections and so on. But I can't really expect her to know how to treat um relatively rare like endocrine system problems. Like that kind of epistemic expectation would not be legitimate, right? It would only be legitimate maybe for the person who like is an expert in that and specializes in it, not of my GP. That's an illegitimate normative or epistemic expectation. Okay, I'll skip where do these normative epistemic expectations, where do they kind of come from? What legitimizes them? Where do these entitlements come from? I'll just leave that. And I just want to show you how this applies to the original puzzle. So I want to say that, look, there's no legitimate social expectation for us to know, for us to be able to rule out the super conspiracy theoretical claims, right? So to the extent that we believe that, say, we believe the 9/11 commission's report about what happened on 9/11, they say, it was a terrorist attack, a suicide attack from Al Qaeda, uh, orchestrated by that terrorist organization. No implications are embedded in there about the reptilian aliens or anything like that. Even though the reptilian alien claims um, are like rival explanations, they're not relevant rival explanations because it's hard to see where the legitimate social expectation for us to be able to know that that does not obtain, where that would actually come from. I mean, so what would be relevant is are claims like here in the green, like have we ruled out pilot error or aircraft malfunction, which we have, or have we ruled out that it's not some other terrorist organization, which they did. So those were like the relevant alternatives that got ruled out. It would not have been relevant to like then, use all the resources to try to figure out whether there was the Illuminati or the reptilian aliens actually behind it all. Okay, so I want to conclude here that the super conspiracy theory entrepreneurs, for example, and also the bona fide theorists, I should say, they have they kind of place an expectation on us to know that their super conspiracy theoretic claims are false if we claim to know our more status quo official beliefs. But this expectation to know or justifiably reject is a distortion of the relevant social epistemic practices. So here's like the thing I just want to end on then. So what this means then is that it's true that we're not justified in rejecting, in disbelieving those alternatives, those alternative super conspiracy theories, but we are justified in ignoring them because they turn out not to be relevant alternatives to our more ordinary status quo beliefs. So that's like the main distinction I wanted to like send home. Okay, there's just some objections and replies, but they'll probably come up anyway. Yeah, so thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chris. If people want to use the kind of emote button thing for clapping to signal anything, please do. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to give a very short response, and then
Mhm.
we'll up to either a reply from Chris, or if there are questions from the audience, we'll take questions from the audience as well. Now, the secret to this response is that actually this paper was meant to be given over a month ago, but due to a problem with Zoom, I couldn't
Mhm.
log on to the account even though Chris could. So there was this weird situation where the person who was hosting the talk couldn't actually log on to have rescheduled things. I foolishly gave Chris my notes on the earlier
Yeah.
presentation. So he's now improved the talk to the point where I largely agree with everything he said. So what I'm going to be pointing out here are really just really small niggles. They're little things that you might want to think about, but I don't think they're kind of knockdown objections or serious worries we need to have about an account. Because, I mean, as you pointed out, we're kind of in agreement that there are particular claims which look fantastical, but actually, when you
Mhm.
think about it, they really actually kind of reflect the kind of worldview you have. So I really quite like the fact you're pushing on this notion of fantasticality, because when I was looking over the slides for the talk prior to today's
Mhm.
presentation, I was thinking about the geographical contingency of what counts as fantastical versus non-fantastical. And the example I was thinking of was when it turned out the NSA was spying on US citizens, something that
Mhm.
by charter it wasn't meant to do. And there was a kind of sense that when the NSA revelations came out, people in America went, my, that's really, really fantastical that they would
Mhm.
do something like that. That goes against our worldview. Well, so those of us not in the US were going, I mean, why didn't you think they were spying on you? It wasn't fantastical for people in Australasia in a way that it seemed to be fantastical for people in North America prior to the revelations coming out. And this thing had a kind of interesting effect in that technically the governments of New Zealand and Australia treated the NSA revelations as if they were fantastical. And the reason why they treated the revelations as being fantastical was that actually it turns out overseas governments who want to have cooperation agreements with intelligence agencies, say in the US, say as part of the Five Eyes network, has to at least pay lip service to the idea that agencies don't spy upon their own citizens, even though technically overseas governments, because they had access to things like the Five Eyes network, were probably very much aware of what the NSA was doing. So things can
Mhm.
even look fantastical, not due to the fact that we actually do think people are super powerful, but because we've got these
Mhm.
kind of political pieties or politeness norms of we just don't mention this kind of thing is going on there. And I think that's kind of interesting when we consider what we take to be fantastical in a kind of ontological sense, it really is fantastical to our worldview, or what we
Mhm.
treat as being fantastical in a pragmatic sense, because we need to treat particular claims as being things we don't talk about or don't question, not because we don't think they occur, but because we need those as a kind of social norm or politeness norm to get things going along. So I like the way you're kind of pushing on the fantasticality here in a way which is going beyond what I said in suspicious conspiracy theories here. It's a really
Mhm.
nice development. The other thing I was thinking about with respect to fantasticality is, of course, and this fits in with your talk of worldviews here, is that you can make something seem fantastical by having a different evidential norm for one particular kind of belief as opposed to another one. So
Yeah.
David Robertson, who's a religious studies scholar who does work on conspiracy theories, will point out that if you think, and this is a big if you think there's a similarity between religious belief and conspiracy beliefs, it is very unusual that we license religious beliefs in society in a way that we don't license conspiracy
Mhm.
beliefs in society, because
Yeah.
religious beliefs are considered to be normal. So we don't require people to have as high an evidential burden for proving those particular claims. But if religious beliefs and conspiracy beliefs are analogous, it is interesting that we apply a different evidential burden there, making those beliefs seem more fantastical than related beliefs within a particular uh, polity or social group. But the other thing I was thinking when you were talking about status quo beliefs, I mean, maybe some status quo beliefs are in some sense fantastical beliefs, in that
Mhm.
it's often thought to be fantastical not to believe them. If you don't believe them, you're engaging in kind of a fantastical thinking. And I realize it's kind of a inversing of the notion there. But I think you're right in the same way that status quo beliefs are this kind of weird foundational belief, which means they kind of anchor beliefs within a community. And there is a
Mhm.
sense in which they are themselves fantastical, but in a way we take to be positive beliefs as opposed to negative beliefs. So yeah, I really like the way you're pushing on the fantasticality here. So now let me go into just one or two little niggles. So
Mhm.
this is something I'm not entirely sure I'm committed to, but it was a thought I had. So you frame this as a question of why can't we reject these super conspiracy theories? I'm wondering whether if we change the question to are we justified in believing them, whether that changes the kind of analysis we do. So there has been some talk in epistemology, particularly in recent years, that often the way we frame a question frames our analysis of the
Mhm.
epistemic concept. So if we focus on why don't you believe X, we have to give an account as to why you don't believe X. Was we change the account to why do you believe X, then you
Mhm.
kind of shift the burden of proof and going back to religious belief. The great example of that is historically the question is, why don't you believe in God? And now
Yeah.
people are going more, the question is actually, why would you believe in God? And that
Mhm.
subtle change in question means that the burden of proof has moved away from the atheist onto the theist. And so it might
Yeah.
be, yeah, it might be why focus on rejecting them as opposed to focusing on the other account, why believe them in the first instance. Uh,
Mhm.
and the other, so and two very quick points. One, I do worry a little bit about the kind of exposure or contagion view, in that, yes,
Mhm.
there's this kind of concern that if you expose people to particular claims, then that can lead belief in them. But I do worry that we're kind of overemphasizing the idea of mere exposure leads to belief in these things. And it's
Yeah.
just not obvious from the empirical literature that mere exposure actually leads to wide scale belief. I mean, so if you look at the empirical literature on belief in conspiracy theories, belief in conspiracy theories does seem to be trending down historically from the middle of the last century to the present day. And also, it seems there's a lot of talk about conspiracy theories going on in the media right now. And because of that trending down, even with
Mhm.
more discussion of conspiracy theories in the media, it's not
Yeah.
actually leading to more belief in those particular theories. So I don't
Yeah.
know whether you need that kind of exposure account as motivating factor for this
Right.
particular kind of discussion. And the only other point I want to make here, which is, and as you know, I'm a little bit concerned with the notion of super conspiracies as a kind, because I
Mhm.
that Barcone's taxonomy kind of captures a thing that you want to be talking about here. But there is this
Yeah.
kind of concern with the kind of examples here, and this goes back to the survey data. So you point out that 44% of Americans believe in some kind of claim that there's an unelected group controlling the government behind the scenes. And the problem
Yeah.
is that it's a very vague claim when we say 44% of Americans believe that there are non-elected people in charge. If you actually look at the way these surveys are done, we've got a Likert scale, which goes from usually 1 to 7 between strongly agree and strongly disagree. Most
Yeah.
people never seem to click 1 or 7. They tend to choose 2, 3, or 5, 6. And it's not quite clear what people are intending when they click, say, moderately to strongly agree with that claim. So, for example,
Mhm.
if you believe that there's an unelected civil service which persists between elections, then you might end up going, well, I mean, I don't think it's the New World Order that controls America, but I also don't think it's the politicians that control America either. I think it might be the middle managers who don't get elected but continue on from one administration to another. And so I think we don't really need to be too concerned
Mhm.
about the prevalence of belief in things that might look like super conspiracy theories, in part because I think you're right to think the real worry here is the idea that they are being promoted by particular super conspiracy theorist entrepreneurs to promote particular worldviews that aren't necessarily about belief in the conspiracy theories themselves, but are
Yeah.
community building devices. Alex Jones may not believe the conspiracy theories he promotes, but he does want people to buy Male Vitality Force 3000 in order to
Mhm.
make sure he makes money to stay on air.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all, yeah, wonderful. That's wonderful feedback. Thank you so much. Um, maybe I'll go backwards. I wrote all these down. So yeah, that is actually that's really interesting about the 44% of Americans who, report believing in this kind of skeletal, uh, at least systemic conspiratorial like claim. Yeah, I mean, I think I just have to say, yeah, I think you're right that the that kind of survey would be more interesting if they could yeah, as it were, rule out that they're not thinking of the unelected civil service or something else, right? So then, yeah, since that is still a possibility that many of the respondents were thinking that way, and there's nothing in the study that eliminates that very plausible possibility, then yeah, we shouldn't really rely on that survey data unscrutinized. Um, I mean, so just to and also this comes to the exposure contagion thing. Didn't I don't think, and I didn't mean to mislead people into thinking that, the mere exposure to the super conspiracy-esque theories um leads to belief. My actual point with that was really the following, that here's the dialectic. Perhaps I'm right that there is this kind of conspiracy skeptical like problem for our own beliefs, to the extent that we do have these beliefs in more like official narratives and stuff like that. Um, but to actually get to that point, you have to be exposed to the relevant, I mean, to the competitors, to the alternatives, right? Like in this case, the competitors are the super conspiratorial claims or theories. So if it turns out that just many people aren't, then it's not really a problem, or even like a individual rational epistemological problem for them. So the dialectic for me was like I was trying to respond to that concern by saying that, well, actually, a lot
Yeah.
of people do get exposure to these theories. I'm not saying it doesn't. It seems like as though it doesn't even change what they believe, whatever they believe, but they do get exposure to it, and the mere exposure to it, it let's just like stipulate it doesn't change whether they believe or reject the theory. If they already believe it, maybe they keep believing it. If they already disbelieve it, they continue disbelieving it. But what it does is it exposes them to these theories, and then the kind of like rational puzzle kicks in now. And also, the second claim I wanted to make is it also acts as kind of like strategic mainstreaming. So even if they just never would have considered such a thing before, by kind of having such repeated exposure to it, if you're like a 16-year-old on TikTok and Instagram, you're seeing it all the time, seeing these kinds of claims all the time, then it's going to start to feel for you as though these are relevant alternatives, things that you do need in fact to be able to, like, to the extent that you do reject them, you need to have some evidence to reject them, right? So it's going to feel like a relevant alternative. So that was really what I was trying to get at, and I think I just didn't make that dialectic clear. Um, and I think you're right also about how question framing can affect how we theorize. So I was starting with like, are we justified in disbelieving super conspiracy theories? Why not start with, are we justified in believing them? Um, yeah, why focus? Why start there? Um, only because only because of the tension with those kinds of conspiracy theories and our more banal day-to-day social beliefs, like just the social belief that, like, yeah, if I mean, I just voted in like some local election here, I just like presuppose that, like, I don't know, my vote counts in some minuscule way, right? Um, if if to be justified in believing that, which I guess I think I am, if it turns out I also need to be justified in rejecting the relevant super conspiratorial theory that nests that kind of claim within it, then that would be bad for me, right? So that's the only reason I start with it. Because I actually concede a lot, right? I even argue that we are indeed not justified in disbelieving those conspiracy theories. Um, so, um, so then since that's what I want to, since I argue that, then it becomes even more pressing. Okay, so then what is the epistemic standing of our more day-to-day social beliefs, right? So that's the reason there. And then your three kind of like more positive comments that were these were really helpful. I really like the it can be fantastical not to believe the status quo. I think that's completely right. If I can just like borrow that phrase, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking of something like that when I was arguing that, for some people, these super conspiratorial claims, they don't have the status as theories, they have the status as fixed points in a worldview. And there's the complement to that with the status quo as well, right? So it's part of their hinge commitment. Their fixed point will be, oh well, the people in charge are by and large like sincere and have our best interests at heart. They make mistakes and there's bad actors, but by and large, like, um, they're like doing their due diligence. They're doing their best. They're not like fundamentally corrupted or untrustworthy or whatever. So that would be like the complement, right? So where, yeah, this kind of trust in um different kinds of authority has a hinge fixed point status as well. So I completely agree with that. Um, and that, and I guess, and the idea is that, like, yes, you can think of super conspiracy theories as like theories, so epistemic. You can also think of them not as epistemic at all, just pragmatic, prudential, like just stuff that you put out there just to secure your prudential benefits. But there's this quasi epistemic thing in between, and that's what I meant with the worldviews. That for the people for whom the both the super conspiracy but also the status quo act as fixed points, they have this hinge framework status, then that's treating the super conspiracy theory and the anti one the status quo theories as quasi epistemic. Okay, so that was really helpful. I Yeah, who was the person who said that was really cool about the religious beliefs, as
Uh,
why do we,
that's
what was
David Robertson.
David Robinson? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely make use of this. That would be that was just really helpful. Something I want to integrate. Okay, finally, your first point. Um, this was really good. I never even thought about this. I was exclusively thinking of fantasticalness as kind of a function of, like, kind of like our ontological commitments. And that's why I thought it's going to be worldview and community dependent. Like, what, like, the status of fantasticalness or not is just going to depend upon the features of the community and what their ontological commitments are. I never thought, never even considered that there could also just be a pragmatic thing, where, yeah, we have to treat something as fantastical because of social norms and because of how also offensive it would be to think otherwise, as it were, right? So that was super interesting. The NSA case, that kind of really illustrates that distinction you were drawing there. That's really helpful. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I agree. That is, yeah, that was like such an excellent point and distinction. So it means although I didn't say explicitly, I was treating fantasticality as a more of like an ontological, something that flows from one's ontology, um, and not as something that was pragmatic. So that's just like a false presupposition I had then.
Although, I mean, I can imagine a reviewer B replying to my kind of reframing of fantasticality, kind of you're shifting the meaning there. But I think it's at least something which can be kind of taken into account. That sometimes when we say fantastical, we mean our ontological commitments. But sometimes we
Yeah.
use the term fantastical, we are actually just talking about social norms. So
Mhm.
yeah. And if that's
Yeah,
helpful, that's
yeah,
great.
that is helpful. So
Yeah.
yeah, great.
Now, we've probably got time for one or two questions if our two remaining audience members to raise their hand or put something into the chat, or if they're just happy listening, they're just happy listening. I suspect everyone else, because it is now dinner time here in China, so I
Oh,
suspect
okay.
is now decamped to go to the canteen.
Okay, that totally makes sense.
Uh,
Um, I mean, if not, yeah, the only thing I wish I maybe could have gotten to is just like, what is it that makes, so I kind of like went over super fast, like, well, what makes an alternative a relevant one versus an irrelevant one? It can't just be that it's incompatible with what you believe or what you claim, because then the super conspiracy theories would then be relevant. So it has to be something else. And I tried to say that, well, here it's a function of social expectations. And I tried to say, look, it's just not, in fact, not a social expectation that we do rule these out. And then kind of skipped over the slide of like, well, what legitimizes those social expectations? Um, but one problem from my view is just like, well, couldn't there be something like a conspiracy theory forum, or like the all day event of David Icke's kind of like all day event lectures, that's kind of a conspiracy forum. Wouldn't there be in that context like a legit like a social expectation that um to the extent you still believe, status quo claims, you then would have to rule out the relevant super conspira super conspiracy theory, namely the reptilian one. And
Yeah,
I,
I've
yeah.
I've sat through two of David Icke's all day
Oh
events.
wow, okay.
And in both cases, I've managed to either injure myself or get ill. So the first time I went, I sprained my ankle the day before. So I spent 8 hours in agony trying to shift myself around. The second time, I got a very serious cold halfway through the event. And
Hmm.
that made the rest of the event very trippy. Yeah, there's something very odd about a man standing up on stage saying that the kind of truths he's revealing to you are the kind of things that get people killed. Says man who traveled overseas on a plane with an entourage in front of a large crowd, who then goes to other countries and makes the same claim, and at no point has ever been assassinated.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess. I mean, he seems to have like a kind of guru status for like the people that are sort of like I mean, he kind of has followers, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so he definitely has guru like features. So okay, oh, there is a question in the chat.
Ah, yes, I wonder. Yeah, so this is from Finn. I wonder if the structure of a shared joke, as perhaps QAnon started, aids in our ignoring of conspiracy theories. I wonder what each of you think of this, and apologies for poor wording. The wording is fine. So yeah, so the kind of premise here is that many people think that QAnon didn't start off as a serious conspiracy
Hmm.
hypothesis. It was role playing online that people didn't realize was role playing online and got treated by the media. I guess my response to this, before we get to Chris, is that it's the story about QAnon starting off as a joke kind of came after the media treated it seriously as a phenomena. And then eventually people went, actually, we should probably go look at the origin of this belief. Oh, it looks like actually it was never meant to be treated seriously. So I do worry slightly when we talk about QAnon hypotheses that we're kind of getting our timeline slightly confused. But that
Hmm.
also aids the fact that because we didn't realize it started off as a joke, we treated very seriously claims that were never meant to be treated seriously. And maybe that's where the contagion stuff becomes interesting. And that even if it started off as a joke, people started treating it seriously and then people started to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, just yeah, sharing, resharing. Eventually, it just reaches someone who just thinks, "Oh my goodness, this is really bad." Um, yeah. So, I mean, actually, for the purposes of like the kind of like skeptical problem that I'm trying to generate with the super conspiracy theories, the fact that their originating source might have been like, I guess let's put it as like non-theoretical, right? So here it's just like it's just role playing and or a joke. Um, as long as it's you can take that content and propose it as a theory, then it would still just because of the way this closure principle works, it would just be the case then that still, if you're justified in believing, say, the relevant claim about Joe Biden, then or relevant claims about Trump, then you would also have to be justified in rejecting the QAnon like theory so written out or so as thought of in your head as a like series of propositions. So of course The fact that it has, in fact, has a source as role play and joking around like on 4chan, um, that would mean that yeah, that would help me in a way because it would mean then there definitely is no legitimate social expectation to be able to eliminate that possibility to justifiably retain the beliefs we have. But strictly speaking, for it to start working in this like closure principle problematic that I was trying to make clear in the talk, the source doesn't matter. The source only matters for how we respond, not for generating the problem, right? So it just matters for how we respond to the problem, but not for making it.
Yeah, so
At
basically,
least
sometimes the
individual.
genealogy is not actually important, it's the effect of the belief.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it just doesn't depend upon its genealogy at all. In for the problem to get off the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a similar case of where it's fairly clear the birds aren't real conspiracy theory that everyone was fascinated by 2 years
Mhm.
ago was a case of older people not understanding how
Mhm.
Zoom and millennials use TikTok. So no one was treating those
Right.
videos seriously apart from 40-year-old journalists who were going, oh, the kids today with their birds aren't real.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't deny that probably did lead to one or two people actually believing there was a conspiracy theory that said the birds aren't real, and then looking out the window going, is that a robot out there? So even
Yeah.
though it starts as a joke, people might still believe it. And there's an interesting question there as to what we do about those beliefs, which have a weird genealogy.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I even think that if you already have the worldview on which you are suspicious of like kind of like mainstream sources generally, and you all already kind of trustworthy of maybe Alex Jones or maybe David Icke or whoever it is that's like occupying right now the kind of conspiratorial entrepreneurial sphere on social media, then I wouldn't just say outright you are now you are irrational in believing even the the or at least having like some credence in the birds are not real view. Um, given like what you trust and what you distrust, because that plays a role in what justifies you in believing what you do or don't. Um, all I can say again is that yeah, I'm taking on board like just like suppose you're like just a really agnostic person even like maybe you're you're maybe you're like yeah I kind of put more credence in lots of mainstream sources than I do in the opposite. Um, okay, then even if you're just like that kind of person, so you're not like outright believing the mainstream positions and going in for status quo views, my like kind of like radical social skeptical puzzle here still gets generated even for that person because it's still the case then like well to the extent that you are to that degree rational in being as confident as you are in such and such position, then you also need to have to the same at least the same degree be rational in rejecting the rival conspiratorial alternative claims. So yeah, this problem can arise even for people who are kind of like yeah like well it's not like radically implausible the birds are unreal or whatever. But
Yeah, which has always been my view on the David Icke thing. It is logically possible. We are controlled by
hmm,
alien shifting reptiles. We actually
mhm.
can't pull that out. And that's why someone like me needs to sit through 2 8-hour long David Icke talks to go, I mean, have an argument or not? And I can say he doesn't, but it's still interesting in the way that his arguments don't work. But you actually need to sit down and actually look at So what's your evidence, Dave? And the answer is it's not much. It's not much, but it's 8 hours
Yeah.
long. It seems like a lot, but it boils down to not much at all.
Yeah, it seems like he's engaged more in like worldview building, like kind of
Yeah.
building a narrative over time. He's like telling a story, and the story, I think it, you're going back to Nguyen's point about the clarity heuristic, it gives people the feeling of clarity, the sense of understanding, being able to make sense of things. And this
Oh,
is
you
part of
kind of.
the,
What's so fascinating about David Icke's 8 hour talks is he doesn't mention the reptilians until about
Hmm.
hour 4 or 5. So he will spend the first 2 to 3 hours just talking about things the West has done badly in politics. And go, well, look, we've been lied to about this, and there's been cover ups about this. And most of the first hour or so is completely factual and just a historical look. For the last 200 years, Western governments have been doing bad things. And then he starts to suggest that maybe there's a theme to these bad things. And there are all these
Okay.
family lines that keep coming up. And isn't it interesting that people who were rich in the 18th century, their descendants are still rich now? So it's interesting that power continues to be in the same small hands. And then very slowly he just starts to go, maybe there's something a bit more supernatural about why these people are in control. And it's a very fascinating slippery slope argument because it's really easy to
Hmm.
grasp the West does bad things part, and then it
Yeah,
only
yeah.
requires you to make a few logical leaps. You go, my God, the Queen Mother was an alien shape-shifting reptile that ate babies and drank human blood on the regular.
Yeah. Like, I guess what's going on in that first half then is like kind of breaking. I mean, so, depending on the audience, they might already be disposed to be fairly like to take all that on board anyway, like kind of already a bit distrustful of authorities. But then it seems like the first part is like breaking the trust in the authorities and then finding a suitable replacement, right? So, but there's another question in the chat. So,
Oh yes, so this is from Greg. So a conspiracy theory is more dependent on the hearer's worldview more than the spreader's worldview, or intent, or the conspiracy claim itself.
it depends on what you mean by are conspiracy theories more dependent on, because before, I tried to say that where they come from, like kind of their causal or genealogical source, doesn't really matter in with respect to making it a rational problem for individuals or groups. But the source or genealogy, of course, does depend. I mean, does matter when it comes to whether or not they are within the scope of what we ought to consider seriously. Are they relevant alternatives or not? But if you mean like just in terms of classifying conspiracy theories, does it depend on the hearer's worldview more than the spreader's um, worldview? So maybe you're thinking of an example like there's a person for whom the reptilian conspiracy theoretic claims are like part of their fixed points. Just like what God exists is for like some sorts certain kinds of religious believers. And then so they start, imagine like the religious believer starts saying stuff about like, well, I'm not for gay marriage because of like what it says about this in the Bible, and then likewise the conspiracy worldviewer here might say like, yeah, like, and I'm really suspicious about whether Biden really won that election fairly because again, the conspiracy hinge that they have. Um, and then so that's for um, that's the spreader. But then for the hearer, if they have an opposing worldview, then yeah, to them, I guess these will sound like maybe one possibility is it sounds like an incredible like theoretical or hypothetical claim that needs to be subject to like whatever the the norms are for like evidence and belief in that context, you know. So um but it could also be more like a deep disagreement. So if you get two people who actually just have a clash of worldviews, then they just might not be able to, they'll just have like different commitments about like what counts as evidence for what. So for example, you know, let's go to the fundamentalist. You know, for them, what is written in the Bible just is like an excellent source of evidence, right? For not just like textual claims, right? But like and pure historical claims, but for like, you know, like claims about like the nature of reality and what will happen in the future. So things like that. Whereas for someone who's like deeply non-religious, so kind of like maybe someone who's in like the like rationalist, skeptical, new atheist space, yeah, I mean for them, they're yeah, they'll just say, well, it's part of their worldview that all claims need to be subject to kind of like scientific scrutiny. And those claims of the fundamentalists don't stand up to like the scientific scrutiny, so that's why, you know, they're irrational, but on their view. But yeah, that maybe is may hopefully I'm answering your question. So then with these two different worldviews, uh yeah, it would explain why like for one, like why each person's be beliefs just seem irrational to each other because they're just not satisfying their own internal epistemic standards basically, right? They because they don't agree on those epistemic standards in the first place. That's why it's kind of like a deep disagreement because their epistemic standards are so contrary to each other. Um, so I suspect something like that does happen. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, so are conspiracy theories more dependent on Hero's worldview more than Spreader's worldview? Yeah, I don't know how to answer more or less dependent here. It seems like they're mutually dependent, right? So, um, I guess whether, I mean, a conspiracy theory, if it counts as more like of a worldview, will just, of course, depend upon the agent for whom it is a fixed point, right? But the very same claim for someone who doesn't share that worldview, well, it could just be then a theoretical, it's just a theoretical claim, right? It literally would be a conspiracy theory for them. So yeah, so it seems like it does just depend upon yeah, which body of agents we're looking at. Like we can't just classify these things independently of the agents in question, whether they're conspiracy theories, conspiracy worldviews, or I don't know, just like uh, inputs to doubt mongering, right? We have to actually look at the agents in question.
No, I agree. The plausibility of any particular claim is going to depend on your worldview and also who's speaking. And of
Hmm.
course, the person who's speaking might go, "Well, my worldview is very plausible to me, even if it's implausible to you." And that's why Alex
Yeah.
Jones screams about how liberals don't understand how the world is run because they believe in Satan. So he's claiming that his worldview is so different they will never accept anything he will claim.
Yeah, I actually think I'm going even a little further than that and saying like just take like all the sentences, whether those sentences count as a conspiracy theory or like a
Oh,
conspiracy
okay.
or a
Yeah.
conspiracy worldview, that actually depends upon the agent's it depends upon what role they perform for the agent. So it really does depend upon the agent's psychology. So that we can't say kind of like a priori, just looking at a set of sentences that, you know, posit a conspiracy, whether it is a conspiracy theory or not. Um, it's just a we can say it's a conspiracy claim, but whether that claim is a conspiracy theory will depend upon the agent in question, because it might be, again, a fixed point in their worldview, in which case it's not a theory. Um, that's what I'm. So I was going a little further actually. So I don't know if you would agree with that, but yeah.
So it gets us into that really tricky thing of labels versus
Hmm.
instances. I'll happily agree. We often apply the label conspiracy theory in ways which don't necessarily count as to whether the words that make up the claim are a theory or not. So
Yeah.
sometimes we'll call something a conspiracy theory when it isn't, but conversely, sometimes we won't call something a conspiracy theory when it fits the definition of what counts as a conspiracy theory. So I bite that kind of bullet there. I'll need to think slightly more about the slightly more relativistic way you're using it there, but I do think it's a very interesting perspective to bring.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, that's good enough for me. I like. I mean, if I'm wrong, I hope I'm just at least interesting. So.
Well, I mean that's what all philosophers hope. If you're wrong, at least you're interestingly wrong,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, probably wrong. So the best we can hope for is to be
right?
interesting.
And therefore, it's actually better to be wrong and your H index to go up than to be right and nobody ever cites you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, which I guess means we should always put some amount of error into our papers to ensure replies are written. That could
Yeah.
be
Well,
that could be an academic heresy.
yeah, I guess it's risky. I just count on like, well, people will think I'm wrong anyway, so hopefully interestingly wrong. Um, yeah, okay. I guess that's it for me. So,
Yep. So I think we've had a great discussion. It was a great talk. Thank you once again, Chris, for
yeah,
a very
thank you so much.
entertaining discussion. I'm looking forward to seeing what the final version of this paper looks like.
Yeah, me too. I mean, this the giving the talk and getting this feedback was really stimulating. So, it's going to help me write the paper. It's just I have so many moving parts, so many ideas in the paper. I need to just try to compress it into like a 8,000 word paper, which is already challenging for me as a philosopher anyway, to do for anything I'm writing. So, that's always like the hurdle. But this was really helpful and really enjoyable. So thank you so much.
So, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Same
All
here.
right, everyone. I will bid you all good night to those of you in Australasia. Good morning to those of you in the EU. And for me, kind of mid-evening.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Ciao.
Mhm.